Welcome back to another episode of GSD Talks. Very excited today because as we continue on the guarding aspect of our industry, very special opportunity that we had today of people that frankly we don't see a lot on podcasts if we're being honest. So very excited to find out exactly what we talked about. But today we have Mary with me and Jason that handled the interview today. So Mary, if you would, why don't you kick it off and let me know, what did we talk about and what are some of the key takeaways that you got?
Yeah, so like you said, we got a fresh perspective that we don't usually get, particularly on our GSD talks, and that is the boots on the ground perspective, if you will. That is the human perspective on what our guards are dealing with and insight into the healthcare industry from the other side. You know, a lot of what we're hearing about is us as citizens, you know, our fear of getting COVID and how our day-to-day operations are affected, you know, how we go grocery shopping, whether we send our kids to school and weddings and other interactions. But omitted from a lot of that is how our healthcare professionals are dealing with it and how our guards are dealing with it. You know, they're on the front lines to make sure that we remain safe as we deal with this other looming pandemic overhead, you know. And I think lost in that is how they navigate security and figuring out where the threat lies when people are walking around in protective equipment and face masks, and when they have to tell somebody that they can't go into a hospital room with a loved one or they're not allowed entry into a building. So we really got to explore the human side of things.
The biggest surprise for me has been just outside of work, like going home to my family. Like before I come in, my son, daughter, and girlfriend, sometimes they don't want me to come home because of the COVID, and due to I work in the hospital, so I have to take all my clothes off and change before I even get there and swap it out. A lot of times I had to, a few times I stayed in the hotel just because of that reason. They don't want me to come home because I work in the healthcare field.
I mean, for me, basically, some of the biggest things I've seen is staffing. I mean, if somebody goes down, you know, usually it's picking it up, but, you know, multiple people start going down. There's only so many people they can pick up or so much time. Staffing becomes a problem when you have multiple people going down, especially with, you know, this virus being able to spread so quickly in small areas. We work in a small area, so you're exposed to people, you know, 4 or 5 people a day. You know, if somebody in that shift goes down, it could affect the whole shift, which internally affects everybody else. And then for me personally, it's same thing Jermaine said it. I mean, I work at a hospital, so I'm constantly going in and out of a hospital where it's, you know, one of the easiest places to catch it. So just being sure that, you know, when I come home, you know, I'm not spreading it to my kids or, you know, my girlfriend, making sure that everybody's okay. Because, you know, working in the hospital, you see the effects this has on people. And thankfully I haven't had to, but like, you know, I couldn't imagine having like, you know, one of my kids, you know, in the hospital with this or something like that.
So given the impacts of COVID as it's impacted the staffing, if you've had staff that have gone into quarantine and not been able to work, or have gotten sick and have had to take time off, have you had any challenges with respect to filling those roles or hiring new employees to bridge those shortages, or had any other challenges as you filled the day-to-day operations?
Trying to fill the role, like a lot of people had went out due to COVID, and some also, once COVID had occurred, felt like they were putting themselves at risk due to some up in age and just being in the hospital and having COVID floors. So a lot of people didn't want to be around those type of environments. But hiring people, we did a great job of hiring people. And the main thing was just trying to keep them focused. At the same time as they came in, they was like, how do you deal with working to the hospital and knowing that there's a potential COVID patient coming up that could possibly have it? And we just tell them, like, just have your PPE gear, your mask, your gloves, hand sanitize, and just don't expect it. You can't just get it that easy.
Standpoint, you probably have just every walk of life coming into a healthcare setting. They have different opinions about the subject. Have you had any, you know, face-to-face interactions with folks that didn't necessarily agree with the hospital's policies?
Yes. A lot of people came in through the emergency room. You know, once COVID hit, lot of hospitals, not just us, throughout, cut down on the visitor policy. And if you come with your loved one to the emergency room, of course you want to make sure they are okay and everything go on. But we tell them, like, due to the COVID pandemic that we going through, only the patient will be allowed in, no visitors. But you can also get the charge nurse number, and she can call you and update you as well. And a lot of people like just felt like, I don't have COVID, or, this is my loved one. I'll just wear the mask, so why can't I just come in? And just try to spring the protocol that trying to stop the spread, limit less people throughout the hospital as possible.
Sure, that's going to make your role incredibly difficult. Have you faced the same issues, Armando?
Yeah, so with regards to staffing on our end, I know that we were in the process of like upstaffing right before it hit, and then it kind of froze for a point. So at one point we did have people go out, and basically what ended up happening is just people ended up working longer shifts, covering in on off days, working with that. And then when it comes to like the hospitals, people visiting, the same thing Jermaine said. Like, so I work in the dispatch. A lot of the calls we got were exactly what you said. Somebody would bring a loved one in that wasn't feeling well. They would tell them, "Hey, all right, we'll take them in, we'll take them back, but you can't be here. You have to, go home because we're trying to stop the spread." But for people dealing with loved ones, they're not always in the greatest like mental state. Their focus is just making sure they're with their loved one and that they're getting taken care of. So telling them that they can't be there cause a lot of people just like freak out and start yelling or screaming. So that's where we get most of our calls, and just trying to keep people calm and let them know like, hey, this is for your betterment and also for them. Like, we can't have just people coming in and out and bringing whatever from the outside in with them, especially if they are sick with COVID.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a heavy topic on that end, but an important one. I mean, it's those things that sort of go unseen, but are felt in a lot of ways. So highlighting those, kudos to you and Jason for doing that. So Jason, what were some of the takeaways that you had?
I would have to agree with Mary. The really eye-opening and important part, I think, of this episode was just the humanizing aspect of that. I think a lot of people just take for granted the security officers throughout the country in general. They are essential workers, and it's nice to know that even through these times, those security officers can feel like they're appreciated in some way, shape, or form. I thought that was just a really humbling experience. And I also thought the topic of how 2020 has kind of turned into just a different beast of its own, not just COVID, but the civil unrest throughout the country. I think all of that wrapped into one really kind of makes you think about how we're handling the situation ourselves from our own personal experiences, but also now taking into aspect what must be going through the head of the security officers and what they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. It really is, again, just a humbling experience altogether.
Well, as far as us, I know like COVID did hit and that was a threat, but at the same time, we also had all the protests and the rioting downtown happened like right in the middle of that. So we didn't really have like a chance to just be completely consumed with COVID. I know that for a while we had to, go on lockdown because there was riots going on. People were breaking into all kinds of stuff. They were close to where some of our hospitals are, so we have to keep an eye on that. So that's like another security threat that it's a little more normal for what we're used to dealing with. But at the same time, it was just like on top of being COVID. So you had people coming in for injuries from being protests, getting into fights. You had people rioting. You had just regular COVID patients coming in. There was a lot of different things going on. On top of that, we started getting back into just doing our basic stuff, our fire drills for the floors, our security meetings that they have on the floors where they explain different scenarios or what to do like severe weather. So that's kicked back up now that the COVID's kind of a little more contained. But as far as what we're doing going forward, I think it's just going to be more of the same, just adding now into it the possibility of it being, like an outbreak or something like that.
I just want to piggyback. Yeah, I just want to piggyback off of what Armando said. The protest, that was like a big storm on us due to the rioting downtown, breaking to the stores, and a lot of patients from the protests, law enforcement all came in due to injuries and just trying to help them out. And we went, like you said, went on lockdown immediately, called our management, just let them know what was going on. And then you also had the COVID patients coming in as well. So that day it was crowded. We had called in whatever shift you want. You try to call the shift in before, after you to try to come in early to help people on their off days to come in to extend a hand. And we also had our company car, someone get in there and patrol the area just to see like where's the protest headed, which direction, and what's going on, and to make sure that our other offsite buildings were intact. And we also even had one of our officers get in plain clothes and just go out there and monitor the crowd as well. Just follow the crowd. Just take his uniform off, follow the crowd, keep us updated on where they're headed to, and is they headed back to the hospital.
I had one more thing on the silver linings. I think one of the biggest silver linings for security professionals is the appreciation the employees now have for security, instead of seeing them as, the big bad enforcer who's making me, wear my badge or wear my mask or do this. Like, they realize like we're actually there taking care of them, making sure they're all right, especially in the hospital. Some of these COVID floors that we had, the nursing staff realized like, how big it is to have somebody that can come in there, because with the COVID floors, in order to get on there, you had to get fully PP'd up and, go in there, which takes time. And when you have patients that are, being combative, arguing, that means that takes longer for somebody to come help you. And I think they realize that, hey, these people aren't, there to just manage all the rules. They're there to take care of you. And that's one of the biggest things I've seen, is just the actual hospital staff taking more appreciation for the security officers, in their day-to-day activities.
Yeah, absolutely. The human side, that's what I think what you all do great on this, is you do bring that out. And this is another piece, because it's very rare when, we get to be in a time where sort of like societal fabric is like stretched and then reset. And a lot of what we knew before, we're having to reset all of that to go forward. So getting a perspective of people that are on the front line. And it's actually probably, if you think about it, I would guess somebody, I remember from our last one that we did before, they talked about how if you look at the manpower and the human power that's out there around how many people, this is a large part of the security industry from a people side that, frankly doesn't necessarily get as much of the limelight as it probably should. So great, wonderful. I'm thrilled that you all did this. So thank you for taking the time to do it. And I look forward to seeing it.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.
Yeah, thankfully.